Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jack Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Listen up, nerds. We're doing pen and paper stuff. The Paladins of Podcast are back. And rolling the dice on new content, upgrades to nothing, and a few missing pages from the rule books. Introducing Joshua Johnson, the man behind... Wait, where did those notes go? Follow Rob and Josh as they navigate the Outer Planes and anywhere in between on the Epic Table Games audio show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Epic Table Games audio show with your Paladins of Podcast, Rob and Josh. How you doing?
Doing good, Rob. How have you been doing this week?
Not too bad. Good news is that we signed papers on a house in the horrible housing market. So,
yes, I love that.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to it, but it's a necessary need.
Yeah, what I'll be myself, I've gotten sick a couple days ago, so for listeners, they're going to hear me being a little more nasally today than usual. I don't usually get sick.
You know, I got sick more frequently since I got the COVID, and then I'm starting to finally get out of frequently being sick. So
yeah, I think it's also like a kind of hyper-awareness thing. When during COVID, you're afraid of getting sick, or at least nervous about it. So then when you do get sick after that, you're just permanently kind of nervous.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So today we're going to mark as episode 3 of season 2, and it's kind of what I guess we've dubbed as the last introduction episode for you. Yeah. This gives us a good dive into who you are, where your experiences lie, and I guess what we wanted to talk about this week is really where your inspiration comes for your story building, your world building, kind of where you pull from to develop your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely gotten a few marked down here, and you won't be surprised as a lot of people use similar inspirations. And I don't want to shame anyone's ideas or anything like that. I can be quite a critical person and quite a hard person when it comes to my opinion. But that being said, when it comes to your inspirations, you have to be very open to what people come up with, because the problem is execution, not the initial idea. So I've got parallel from me and open, which is not good. The Morkborg
Yep.
The Morkborg book. So, for example, you mentioned that book is heavy metal inspired.
Yes.
A good way for me to put it, for me personally, it's got a lot of what I'll call, and I apologize for this, emo stuff in it. It's not. It's just a joke.
That's funny.
However, it is not a bad book. It's a great book, actually, now that I've read through the vast majority of it. I will equate it to a huge container of salt. If you can apply this book to most campaigns and have a very good time, a pinch of salt in your food, pretty good. Don't dump the whole container of salt into your food. It won't end well.
Sure. Which in this case, that's kind of what takes it from, it's a standalone game, which is one thing, and it does fine in that one realm, but it has enough where you can sprinkle it elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Adds enough flavor.
Yeah, and with that applies to anything. Please remember that when you watch something or you read something, yes, it's really cool when you take in that media at your pace, but if you inject that in your game either too heavily or without considering how it's being executed, the game can turn really poor, or your players might just not enjoy it. And even then, sometimes they will just enjoy it. But I want to start with one of the bigger inspirations, a person I actually learned DMing from. If you go on YouTube, one of the more interesting campaigns or one of the better ways to learn campaigns is from what is his name? It's the Running the Game series by Matt Colville. I do not necessarily recommend it if you are brand new to DMing. I did watch it when I was brand new, and it helped carry me some of the way. But it seems to slightly over-mystify DMing. But I do recommend if you've started DMing and you're seeking a little bit of inspiration or a certain way to handle things, I think his Running the Game series on YouTube is absolutely fantastic. And I've rewatched it multiple times. He's got over 100 episodes. He talks about things very well. He explains his own inspirations, and it's because of him that I DM the way I do today. So that's at least my largest one.
We talked about a little bit of that last week. You really mentioned a lot of excuse me, a lot of your DMing style and how you came up with those formats and how you really manage tables, etc. But when we look at the idea and concept of true story inspiration, I mean, you mentioned that sometimes you have a little bit of an issue. You mentioned the Resident Evil, where you were just ripping off Resident Evil way too much.
Yes.
And you realized it. Are you really the Tolkien fantasy guy? Do you pull from common tropes that you see in medieval fantasies? Are you where does
those inspirations come from?
Yeah.
Okay. So, very good point. I think a lot of players like me, where we've been into it for I'd say the last 10 years, we understand generic fantasy without maybe as much of the depth. So the best way I can describe it is we're all Tolkien-esque, not necessarily Tolkien.
Sure.
If that makes enough sense.
As if you're anywhere in Middle Earth kind of idea, you're instantly plopped through.
Pretty much. So with that base in mind, that is how a lot of people like me start, and we work off of that. The second idea I'll bring up is I usually infect, what I'll call it, because it's not necessarily a positive thing, is the current thing I'm into. So, and for any people listening who are currently running games, and even if you're playing games, you can definitely recognize if your DM, or if you are DMing, that you might infect your game with something you've been watching, or reading, or listening to, because with the whole Resident Evil thing that I ran a while back, that was a 1 to 2 session segment of the game, because at the time I was playing a little Resident Evil and I was watching a playthrough. So while it was mostly accidental, that is why it happened. It basically entered my subconscious and I injected it in the game. But the difference is it went really well, and I didn't take it necessarily to a 10. So please recognize that. Yes, if you are heavily influenced by the media you're engaging with, let it be in your game, but don't let it pull your game down or apart, because some people don't understand that they're thematically harming their game. When people want to play hard medieval fantasy, whether it's high or low, and then suddenly they turn it into anime fantasy, which is very, very different, and players are not necessarily for.
Sure, I understand the constantly switching thematical elements or general styles. But it feels like we're dodging the question still.
What necessarily inspires me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of books do you read? What kind of things are you really into? What kind of things help your homebrewed story? When you sit down to put together a campaign from complete scratch.
Okay.
Where do you really pull from? Those ideas, the character tropes, the concepts.
Yeah, so that is where I enter kind of Tolkien-esque. Actually, anime does inspire a lot of my games.
Okay.
It is certain concepts from certain shows that are executed really well. For example, I won't say which in case one of my players listens to this, but the Fate Stay Night series, Unlimited Blade Works, there is a certain character with a huge plot twist. Now, I have adapted that plot twist to the character. Now, obviously, it's up to the player and how they proceed, whether they engage with that plot twist or not. But yeah, that's an inspiration. Another one is the King in Black comic book series that happened in the last couple of years here for Venom. Absolutely fantastic comic line. Please read it, or even go on YouTube and watch someone talk about the comic. But yeah, the King in Black story immediately engaged with me, which you'll probably be seeing something about that in the MCU in the next couple years.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, so for me, it's the media I love the most. So for now, or for recent, it was the King in Black series. So essentially Marvel-inspired. For anime, it's very popular shows with fun tropes, but more interesting plot twists, because anime actually has really interesting and engaging plot twists that aren't always out of left field like other types of media do.
Anime is funny because if it's not Dragon Ball Z, I find myself really hard to get into it.
Yeah.
In fact, I need to follow certain shonen style anime to get into it. I like a lot of flashy battle scenes, kick ass. Like that's sort of where I sit. Or samurai based.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Samurai Champloo, Samurai 7.
Samurai 7 I actually loved.
Yeah, it's great. In fact, you have Samurai 7 and 7 Samurai, which is the same exact story, told two different ways, and I absolutely love both of them. So those kind of anime are really good. They're very story-driven.
It's also the strong characterization that I think creates the engagement for your games. You see those characters, and you almost hope for that for your players.
Yeah.
That they get to go through cool moments or plot twists, and you wish for your players to engage with the game on that level. And I've definitely done that. I've gotten my players to cry at other characters' deaths and stuff.
Sure.
It's like it can be very endearing for your players.
I'd like to put a side note as we talk about players crying over deaths. And I've got one player. She is a fantastic player, and she her body handles stress through tears. Mm-hmm. So we had one game where she had fallen a great distance and taken a lot of damage and enough to kill her character.
Uh-huh.
Well, not a big deal. Just swap out names. We'll run into your next character.
No.
Soon enough.
No.
Soon enough. Not a problem.
It happens.
But on this game in particular, this night, we went through 3 or 4 characters in the same way.
Oof.
Anytime that there was a massive damage event, that would essentially take out her character.
A massive damage event?
I say massive damage because truthfully, the idea was they were crossing pillars of stone on a bridge high up.
Oh, it just didn't end well.
And yeah, it was just a failed reflex save, and
gotcha.
There was enough falling damage, and it hit higher on the end, and she got lower on her save rolls.
Sure. Yeah.
So I've noticed that I generally roll my dice openly anyhow. So you can't deny what you see.
Sure.
That's what it is. So yeah, after 3 or 4 character deaths within 20 minutes, she was in absolute tears, and it reminds me of the Dead Gentleman productions of the Gamers. I'm not sure if you've seen. Now that's old school nerd D&D related material, but there's a joke about how bards are pretty much just dispensable. You change the name, you build a wall of bodies of dead bards to hide behind.
Maybe, yeah.
If you ever get time, check it out. It's interesting.
Where can I find it?
I believe it's still on YouTube. And again, that's The Gamers by Dead Gentleman Productions.
Okay.
So
I might actually watch that.
Their film has been around, I want to say, for almost 20 years.
Holy cow.
I know that I was looking at Gen Con's schedule, and they have a 20th anniversary Dead Gentleman's Productions, The Gamers panel. So I think it's about 20 years old. Anyhow, I didn't mean to go on too much of a sideline. We're talking about the inspiration that you utilize.
I'll go with a little more inspiration. While not injected into my game, the concepts are. I used to read the Artemis Fowl series.
Okay.
That's what I read a crap ton of in middle school. Oh my gosh, they have 6 or 7 books now.
Really?
The first 3 or 4 I absolutely love. I read the 3rd one to death. Please go check them out. Especially the early ones are just really fun and good. That was kind of my first time being engaged with the whole concept in media of other character perspectives at multiple times. And it was going off of that idea that plot twists can happen, characters can be mentally engaged on a deeper level. It's kind of the idea of going from 1930s-esque tube-style animation of a character does to going, I don't remember the character's name, some sort of animated cat, whatever his name was. Basically 1940s to 50s, going into characters instead of think, and showing character depth. And that idea through the book helped engage me to this day with the idea that when you play, you shouldn't necessarily just do, and if you see your players doing that, that's not always a positive sign. If you're playing a beer and nuts game, whatever, it's fine. but in general, your players are going to do things, and if they do something jarring or strange, you go, hey, like, what is your character thinking to do that? So that's one of actually my bigger inspirations for making sure characters think, and that it's helping players to roleplay a little bit. Another one is the Septimus Heap books. During my younger years in middle and high school, and I'm sure a lot of people can attest to this, there's an absolute flooding of medieval fantasy and high fantasy books into the kind of teen, preteen, young adult genre. For me, I read the Septimus Heap books. There are a few of them. I really enjoyed them. I can barely remember them, but the thing I really did like about them was the mysticism behind magic, a concept that has kind of been burned to the ground a little bit in recent years. And for that really did it for me. Like, there is one concept that was really cool. There was basically the equivalent of a magic item. It was a golden arrow. Interestingly enough, for the first book, you never see it put together. One character actually has, like, the stalk of the arrow, and the other one has the arrowhead. So the main character is able to use the arrowhead to fly, but they can only fly very slowly. The other one can use the stalk of the arrow. They can fly extremely fast, but with barely any precision at all.
Wow.
It's only later on in the book that the two pieces get put together, and it's a really cool moment of the main character is able to, like, take control of a situation because now they have the ability to fly incredibly fast and precisely.
Nice.
And don't be afraid to do cool stuff like that with your magic items. That's how you make magic items less technical and more fantasy.
I agree. And on that note, I remember there was one time pulling from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I created the coconuts of fast travel, and
What?
I created the coconuts of fast travel.
Okay.
And it was as long as the party was not mounted and they were clopping the two halves of the coconuts together.
That's wonderful.
They could travel at the speed of a horse during a day on foot.
Please, everyone do that immediately. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
It's one of those things. And I mean, on that aspect, I started injecting things like fast travel in my games because a lot of times when people are traveling between two cities, unless there's combat, it's just a boring slog.
Please do that at some point. If you're listening, please do that at some point. Don't keep making your players do wilderness survival if you're at a higher level. There's just no point, and they don't necessarily enjoy it anymore.
Right, and I mean, maybe for the first few nights, maybe a few sessions, sorry, not a few sessions, but like a few season days, essentially, just sort of roll through. But the coconuts of fast travel was just a fun way to inject a little bit of pop culture in there. And that's, I think about when you said earlier, is that the infect. Sometimes it infects the game. And I'm going to shamelessly say that I love enough pop culture and media where I can inject full storylines as a starting point and be okay with running and seeing how the game goes.
Yeah, so as we said, like that whole coconuts of fast travel, that is like a beautiful injection. That's just a fun reference. Mm-hmm. It's not too over the top. It actually is kind of a problem solver. That's like a cool, uncommon, or common magic item your party could acquire, and now you don't have to worry about your horses or keeping them alive.
Right.
That's actually like fantastic, and that is what you adapting things into the game should do. It should be interesting, engaging, and non-problematic, and that is great. I recommend that everyone create a magic item like that.
Now, I've noticed, because I'm a part of a lot of different groups between Reddit, Facebook, and whatnot, there are newer people, or even some experienced people, who are looking for ways to kind of curb mistakes, I'll say, that they've done, or they don't know how to handle things. Like, how do I create a magic item that does this? And I don't know if it's experience that my response is, well, you just say it does what you want it to do. I mean, inconsequential. Like, if it's an inconsequential magic item,
mm-hmm.
it's an inconsequential magic item. For example, the coconuts. There's no real game-breaking instance with that.
No,
people think, well, how are the players going to abuse it? Well, the fact is, anything you give the players, they're going to find a way to abuse it.
Yeah, eventually that'll happen, and that does not have to be a bad thing. Please, I know that sometimes that situation can be bad, but it's actually very rare. Like, let's see, if I think about it with that whole horse cloppy whatever, let's say maybe they're like, oh, we want to leap across this canyon. Well, technically as part of your long jump, maybe they'd rule that while clopping, they can move fast enough to like leap across like 20 to 25 feet, which definitely breaks like 5e long jump rules. But is that really bad? Does that really sound bad? Oh, well, I wanted them to do it this way. Well, what a bad mentality. Let them handle it.
Right, and I like that because any solution is a good solution. And as long as they're following a solution, it doesn't have to be your solution.
Yeah.
And I like that because a lot of times you hear horror stories of people who say, well, they didn't do it the way I wanted them to do it. That's irrelevant.
Which is also usually in the form of, like, I expected them to perform this check and do it this way. And bad approach immediately.
Absolutely. It should be open-ended. And I think it shows a sign of both flexibility, adaptability. I'm going to put a slash between those two words, but it also shows a little bit of experience in that world. Now, how do you feel about just strictly ripping off characters?
I most cases think it's pretty poor. Now,
as NPCs.
As NPCs, I think it's really poor as soon as anyone can recognize the characters. It's not necessarily poor before that. So, for example, let's say you have a table by chance full of people who've never seen Star Wars before. Mm-hmm. If you put Darth Vader into a game, that will be one of the better games you will ever run because that's a super cool character. It's not like you had to work to make their plot line.
Right.
And as long as no one recognizes it's Darth Vader, like, it's really cool.
Well, I think in this aspect, you've heard the stories of how Superman can't just put on glasses and be unnoticeable.
Right.
But there's proof that even when Henry Cavill was Superman, he would put on a pair of glasses and walk around New York City and nobody recognized him. So if you're going to use something like Darth Vader for this example, I'm going to say that as long as you don't deck him out visually the same, most people won't really pick up on it. And I think his character trope is easy enough to identify in multiple different areas that it's not too difficult to inject him in any game and be unrecognized.
With that, I will reference something. I'm currently learning a new RPG. It's the Konosuba tabletop role-playing game. For those of you who don't know, Konosuba is a really fun anime, probably one of the best comedy ones for isekai. It's a parody of isekai. For Rob, if you don't know, isekai is the trapped in another world genre. Okay. It's very...
Like Digimon.
Actually, Digimon is one of the early on isekai. Believe it or not, the market at this point in anime is over-flooded with isekai. Before that, Konosuba came out in 2014, 2015, I believe. It was a really fun parody of that. So go check it out. But they released a TTRPG 2 to 3 months ago. I picked it up. Really, I consider it inappropriate on the part of the RPG. They basically want you to introduce the Konosuba characters. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you're picking up this RPG, it's because you've watched or love Konosuba, and now you're going to play the TTRPG. There are ways to handle it, but in general, please do not one-to-one inject the character into the game. And because everyone's already seen it, it actually is a little cringy to just watch your favorite character happen to show up. That's the same thing as having the DMPC be the hero savior of the game when...
I don't want to talk about DMPCs.
Yeah.
That is... Dude, that's instant soapbox, instant infuriation.
Yeah.
But I think you and I stand on slightly different points with recognizable characters in games. I think sometimes it's absolutely fun, especially when it's not revealed until you've developed a connection with the character. After you developed a connection with this NPC and it finally clicks, oh shit, this is who it is. I love that.
Well, what do you mean in regards to that? Do you mean as a non-D&D-esque character, or do you mean as they're this character from either a previous campaign or they're famous in D&D lore?
Both. I love it when we meet iconic characters from media, regardless of if it's in-game media or if it's even a different character from a popular book series.
Okay.
I mean, granted, there are certain things that just wouldn't really float my boat. Like if we met some dwarf who happened to be really good with an axe, who's semi-sarcastic, has a beard and long dark hair.
I would just be like, oh, that's just a dwarf.
That's just another dwarf. It doesn't matter who he is or how famous he is.
Yeah.
It's just another dwarf. Same thing with most wizards. Like, oh, this wizard is old with a robe and a long beard and a staff. Well, like, okay, Gandalf, let's keep rolling. I don't care enough. But on the flip side, if it's characters that I actually like, I love seeing other people play those characters, either as reference for PCs or as the DM play them as NPCs in a new way. I love experiencing characters I like in every way possible.
See, we are hitting a bit of disagreement on this because I'm not sure we're on the same page with the idea. So obviously we're not talking about like direct name. I'm sorry, that's just goofy. You should not be literally just, not as the DM, as a player. You should not be literally just playing Wolverine, Gandalf. Oh, you're making faces I don't like. No.
I don't mind. It's a little ridiculous. But again, we're looking at really popular characters. So I think, like, for example, I was in a game, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Dresden series.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the Dresden series, there is a Knight of the Cross who is a warrior, a holy warrior, named Michael.
Yeah.
And I played in a game where somebody essentially built Michael as the character and named him as such. Now, Michael's a common enough name where it's super unimportant. It's not a super popular series in the outside genre of fantasy, so only certain people are really going to know if they're familiar with the series. Most of us at the table knew. I'd say we're split half and half. And he played the character really well. It was just another way to see the character, and I just looked at it like a reiteration of the character.
See, that's not bad. That's actually like a good gray zone one that I'm more or less okay with. What I have a problem with is when because he's like clearly heavily inspired. He has a character he's interested in playing, but he's clearly taking it to his own degree. I'm talking about the players who literally go, I want to be this character. And sadly, this is where I have to bring up anime again. A lot of people make anime-inspired characters. Okay, that's not necessarily a bad thing. What makes it bad is when they make that character because they want to be that character, and then instead of role-playing their own character, they're acting out a character that they've already seen, experienced a storyline, and are already done with. Essentially, they've already been through their character arc.
Okay.
And I am not for that. To me, you should be playing your own character that you enjoy and are inspired by, and I know that's a little ironic because, they're so invested in this character. No, you're invested in a character that's separate technically from what you're playing. What you're playing is a character at your table in a different situation, experience, and usually even lived in world.
I absolutely agree. I do not have as much of a problem with it, though. I like it when people get involved in their characters. And as both a DM and a player, I think it's really fun to watch people, characters who are super involved regardless of the circumstance. I mean, is it, for example, you said Wolverine. Do I want to roll with a Wolverine who's called Wolverine, acts like Wolverine, talks like Wolverine, and is absolutely 100% Wolverine if we're playing a setting where that character doesn't quite fit? No, but as a DM, I'll make him work. As a player, well, you know what? Let's do what you do.
All right, let me show you what happens now.
Okay.
Because this is where things naturally lead into the negative side. Okay, let's say you start at level 5. Okay. Well, sadly, I have to go off 5th edition only. 5th edition, you start at level 5. You have a decent start set of abilities. You might have a feat or two. You have a decent amount of races to pick from, along with their passives. What people try to do is they try to build that character. And sadly, when you want to play Wolverine, you have to play a champion fighter that gets the regen at 18th level, and it's not fast regen. So then what they do is they go, well, I don't really feel like I'm experiencing what I wanted to out of this game. Is there a way we can work in a feat or an ability where they start regenning?
You're absolutely right. People do. And I will say that I want to say comes from a lack of experience in character building. One thing that I would like to kind of reference back with Potato, for example, he pulled from a lot of character inspiration that took place in real world or other media. Like, for example, He wanted to make a character that was essentially Dwayne The Rock Giant. Not Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Yeah.
Get it?
Yeah.
And he would play up this, and it was for his brother, and he was going to be some form of Macho Man Randy Savage.
Sure.
So it was over the top to the point where it was absolutely absurd. It was ridiculous.
Yep.
I love those characters for who they are, but to watch Potato and his brother Sean play these characters was obnoxious. Partially because they couldn't stay in character enough, and when they chose to be in character, it was like, we don't need that right now.
Yeah, being the kind of half-hearted, and it's a little disruptive towards narrative, technically.
That's how it generally comes across. That's when I'm starting to have an issue. The characters themselves are fine, whatever, but experience will dictate. You know that you cannot just do certain things right off the bat. I mean, there's a process.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it that kind of sours it. Is as I said, it's characters who've already experienced their arc, which also means like they want to play Luke from Return of the Jedi instead of Luke from like the beginning of A New Hope. Mm-hmm. And with that, you run into all the problems. They want to be powerful. They want to have all the abilities. They don't want to wait. Mm-hmm. They don't want to experience the character arc.
And that's when you have to express to them, A, they're still at X level, and we're talking about the levels that take to develop it. I think this kind of also relates. Our listeners know that I've talked about Thull. I've talked about Thull to you. And Thull is my half-orc barbarian.
Oh, yes.
Who is absolutely abysmal when it comes to anything but kicking ass and eating. In fact, if it's not one of those two things, Thull has zero interest. And I've played Thull across multiple games, multiple systems, multiple worlds. And some people are on the board like, why do you play the same character? Well, A, it adds to the character.
I agree.
This character as a whole has a huge unrealistic background. Like, he is world jumping, he's experienced, he knows a shit ton, but every game, he still starts off as a blank slate. His character mentality is the same. It doesn't mean he knows everything he's experienced before.
Yeah, and for you, when you run that character, essentially, every time you play him, it is a different story. Just because the character premise is the same doesn't mean he goes the same places.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what we're really shining a spotlight on right now without like pinpointing it, we've talked about the adjacent effects of it. People don't look at playing a repetitive character, whether it's something that they've played before or a character from popular culture or media or something that they enjoy, characters from books, etc. They don't oftentimes come into this realizing that this character is a iteration, a version of that character.
Yeah.
Like, they want to play the character, like you said, that has a finished story arc now, that they know from start to finish. They don't look at it in game as, this is my story of the character, this is this world's character. Which
is why I usually lean away from it. If someone comes to me and they're like, I kind of want to be like this person, like, that's totally different.
Yeah.
That's why I shut down the like hard one-to-one, I want to be this character. I don't like that.
And that I can definitely respect, because when I think about it, it doesn't matter what they're trying to do, I always default look at it as this is their iteration of the character. And so I'm not going to say I tone out most of all the extra fluff that they will keep trying to add to it, but I must, because, like I said, it doesn't bother me. Now, I also think it's good to ask, at this point, having so much culture behind you in your consumption of favoritized media.
Yeah, absolute, like overloaded internet stuff, basically.
What tropes are you tired of seeing?
In just media, or
when they're injected into the game?
Oh gosh. My number one is being smarmy, being like a smartass, and you just know better to the point where like you don't listen to other characters. Mm-hmm. That is it. They are always a problem player, and you know what? It's not even technically consistent. They might do it a little bit casually, which is fine. Mm-hmm. A lot of people do it. That's fine.
Yeah.
But when they have like a bad day, they turn it to a 10. They're unagreeable. They don't want to work with the party. Or, even worse, they're disrespectful and treat people like they're dumb.
In popular culture, in popular media, I can point out two cases where it bothers me the absolute most. Iron Man because this is the exact person we're talking about, essentially, as Iron Man. But Iron Man knows when to turn it off.
Later on. Yes. Earlier on, they definitely, like, fetishize you being your own man.
Yeah, and his sarcastic remarks, he never turns it off. Which comes up again in Marvel's Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers never turns it off.
Yeah.
And it's constant, and it threw it off. And I like putting these equations out there because some people don't see it, some people do. But when we're talking about being smarmy, these are the two characters in popular media that really designed and developed that knack for it. And as we mentioned, growing tired of it, I'm going to continue sitting in the MCU because Star-Lord is the same way.
But at least Star-Lord's like also a loser. You watch him, he's a kind of lovable loser.
Yeah, he's easier to handle.
Yeah.
He's like Tony Stark light.
Yeah.
But you see the same type of
tone
and comedic value in not just those three characters, but now supporting characters. So they really played heavily into that trope.
Yeah. You will also see that in many, many shows. It actually appears a lot in B-styled characters. So one I can bring up is Invincible, Amazon Prime show. Mm-hmm. It's adapted from the comic, the great comic. You will see in the adaptation that Amber, I will call a slightly controversial character, not for any good reason. She is super smarmy and kind of annoying. It's totally tolerable until later in the show where it reaches like a 10 for a certain moment, and after that, I've never seen anyone who watches the show after that moment like her, because the moment comes when the character Mark, who is the main character, basically reveals to her that he is a superhero. That's why he always like dips out, like disappears for periods of time and stuff like that. And she goes, "Oh, I knew." And you go, "Wait, so you know he's saving people's lives, including yours at times, and you're pissed at him because he didn't like tell you sooner?"
Yeah, that's a dick move.
And it's like
her part.
It's like you're not an intelligent character. You're smarmy, and you've been written to be more powerful and more. There's too much of like I know better than the rest of this show, and that happens in other forms, and that's where we see it turn into TTRPGs. It's not endearing.
Right.
Like,
I agree.
Please don't play characters where you're in charge of everyone, or you think you're better and treat it like a trait. I played a character like that about like six-ish months ago. Played a couple sibling characters. My character's name was Londa. He's an assassin rogue. I literally played it to my own detriment. Yes, I would be somewhat disagreeable, but I would literally say out loud, no, my character just thinks he's right. Like, the second you show he's wrong, he just backs down. Mm-hmm. Like, if you play it, be like reasonable and be willing to back down, because there's a difference between you being an asshole like in character and then following up by being that asshole out of character, which it usually turns into.
I absolutely agree, and that's a great thing to point out too, is because a lot of people have trouble separating character from player.
Yep.
And I remember, and I've talked about it before in our audio show last season, is that I had a character concept of an obstinate healer who was a zealot who would totally heal you if you're willing to, pray to his god. Like, hey, I'll do this for you, but you have to do something for me. And I'm not that type of person. But I had to let everybody know, like, this is a character idea I have. This is the kind of person he wants to roll with. It's not the type of person I am, but I'm interested in doing this.
And when you say that stuff, it makes me way less nervous. Because people will be like, this concept is great and it's interesting, and I'm just like, it is, but if you play it, it's not going to go super well. At least for like most people. Because most people would like take you doing that in character, and then they would get offended out of character. Of course, it can be slightly disruptive to play, but only as much as the players allow it to be.
I can agree with that too, and it's just one of those interesting facts. I got so many thoughts in my head right now, and I'm trying not to veer off too much, because as we talk about character tropes, I think it's 2 that I get tired of seeing, and it's not the main character syndrome. Doesn't bother me. It's not the lone wolf syndrome. Doesn't bother me. It's literally the unexpected hero.
Oh, like you guys go to the king and you find out that one of the characters is like the prince or something?
No, Bilbo Baggins Frodo Baggins. They don't want to go on the journey. They have to go on the journey. They want to fight the process the entire step of the way. And the reason that I don't like it at the table, and I'm tired of it, is because I tried to play this character and I've seen how horrible it was, and I can pinpoint it now. But if your party has no reason for one character to really be there, and he doesn't want to be there, why does he stick around? Well, now he has to be there. Now he's just bitching the entire time. He's not... Yeah. And it's hard... Even if the character is hard to engage with, the player can be super engaged with that trope, but it's still hard to manage because it's not against the party, but it's against the flow of progress.
Can we go a little bit more into examples of the unexpected hero? Because I feel like I might have done that a couple times. My idea of the unexpected hero injected into a game is like suddenly you kind of turn a character into like not necessarily the main character, but like an overly important character. Is that kind of the right idea?
No, I wouldn't say so. Even if a character is overly important, that can be acceptable, especially if we look at DMs who run character arcs for their story, for their character players.
Yeah, even I do that.
So that essentially gives everybody the moment in time to shine. You're balancing and shifting balance as the live story progresses. But we're talking about the guy who is forced to go on some perilous journey that's bigger than he is. So we're still... like far beyond
what would be ever asked or expected of a character?
Essentially. That's sort of like the broad stroke. To kind of give the better examples of... I'm going to stick with Frodo and Bilbo Baggins here. They felt like, they needed to go on the journey. They had to, essentially, is what it came down to. Gandalf told them, hey, you have to do this.
I'd say Frodo's slightly better about it. Mixture of temptation from the ring along with... Actually, it is kind of just the temptation of the ring.
Well, remember, Frodo needed Sam. Bilbo did on his own.
Yeah.
I mean, Frodo and Sam destroyed the ring. Bilbo did not. But we take the look at... Neither of these characters wanted to go on this journey, but they had to. In fact, they were told that they needed to. They were chosen to do so. They didn't really have a choice to do so, and they fought it every step of the way. Mm-hmm. The only thing that really made it interesting at certain points was the fact that they had scenarios that remained interesting. Otherwise I could really give a shit less about Frodo, Sam, and Bilbo. I don't need to watch them complain about an entire mission the entire way. They felt like they were there essentially just to weigh down interesting things.
Have you seen this happen in like an actual like player character form?
Mm-hmm.
Can we have an example of that?
Yeah. So I'm going to give two examples. One is the one I attempted just to see how it played, and this is when it was really pointed out to me. I played a character. He was a bard. His name was Lord Rune Silvertongue. So his first name was Lord.
So the last name makes it funny.
Yeah. So his first name was Lord. And I did this in particular so he could play off the fact that with a name like Lord, how could you not be famous?
Right.
So this guy was a smooth talker. As a bard, his specialty was oratory, ability to tell stories and whatnot. And what he would do is anytime he told a story, he would omit the party's contribution. So it was always him, all the time, 100% of the him. Now, that leads into the main character sort of syndrome, if you really look at it.
Sure. But you're also playing a character concept.
Right. And he hated going on missions. He did not want to go on missions. But he had to. And so it was like, guys, we have to go do this. It's like, I don't want to do that. Like, this is going to suck. Like, we're going to have to do this, and then we're going to slog through this, and it's just unfortunate. I know it's a pain in the ass.
What you're talking about, actually a lot of people know of. I believe the term nowadays is called reluctant hero.
Yeah.
It's someone who doesn't, and this is actually a very bad subset of player or player character, when you are playing a character who does not truly want to be an adventurer. This does not work as a playable concept in general.
I agree, and it's hard. Yeah, reluctant hero is the term now. Yeah, it clicks so much. I'm like, shit, I can't believe I forgot that word this time. But yeah, it's the reluctant hero that the trope is my number one that I'm tired of seeing. And then the other one is, it's based on the fact that I've realized players develop two types of characters. Characters that are either exemplified versions of how they see themselves or how they wish that they were.
That's a lot of people's first character, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, still to this day, if you think about it, most people play characters. They either like the perfect version of how they see themselves, or the perfect version of who they want to be.
Yeah.
And while I don't mind that, it's when we get into people who think they're incredibly smart and play characters who are smarter than what they are.
That's where I want to be removed, because you will see that so incredibly often. No, don't be surprised when you see players like that. Sadly, the only people who repeat these characters are almost narcissists. They think they're kind of just better than everyone else, or they're also like tactician-esque. They think that all their ideas are better than everyone else's. I'm slightly tactician-esque, but I just literally, if someone expresses to me, hey, I want to try this idea, out of game, I just go, okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that idea. And then in character, I reasonably go, like, oh, my character maybe doesn't know so much about this, and I listen.
Mm-hmm. And that's, again, that comes from experience. And I'm not going to say it's just the experience in playing tabletop games. It comes from the experience of listening and cooperating with your party.
Yes. Okay, so I will bring up this idea. So with the whole reluctant hero thing and what you just talked about, this is a problem that some DMs go through when it comes to thinking they need to be the best team in the world. If a player goes to and goes, oh, my character doesn't have proper motivation to go on this adventure, you presently tell them, okay, please roll up a new character. We're playing D&D. You want to be on the adventure. I understand if your character has like in-game character conflict and stuff, but there's a big difference between like you needing to write a story so they're interested versus they're here to play the game and they by default should be interested in cooperating with the party.
Right, and that's the horrible rub for so many people is that we, as storytellers, we need people who are invested enough to want to go.
Yeah.
To fight the system. Can it work? In specific scenarios and situations, but the DM should be prepared for it, and you should probably be pretty upfront with your party. Like, yo, this character is going to blah, 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 not want to do it. And I'll say that, with my character, Lord Silvertongue here, he owed money to a lot of people. And I was like, he's got to pay it back. So when he mentioned he's going, there's going to have to be a monetary value to it. And he had reasons to go, but again, he wouldn't choose to go into the mines and slay some dragon. He would probably choose to save a puppy. Yeah,
that's like a cool rotatable character. If you like want to bring him in for a few sessions, be like, oh, we're going to go on this job where we steal this art piece. That would work for him, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
it'd be pretty cool. But like jumping into the bowels of the abyss to stop a demon is not his repertoire.
Right, and the problem is in this case, reluctant hero Dick, not really party favorable.
Yeah.
So why is he a character that you're going to have on your team? And truthfully, as a player, why are you going to put him in that situation?
Players I see do make them by kind of accident. They think the character is going to be cool. It just turns out that when the DM and the player aren't really on the same page, it doesn't kind of end well. And then not only that, you limit the storytelling. So with your character, they are unable to go on technically heroic adventures almost at all. So like you said, your character's not willing to die. They have a lifetime to live. They have other ways to acquire money.
Right.
So sadly, there has to be a little bit of that, like, hey, I mean, we all have to go on this adventure because we're here to play some games, not play those games.
Right. And I'm watching time pretty closely here because I know we're trying to stick to within reason. We're over the 45 minutes, which is great. But I want to push it a little farther because I have a question because you've mentioned rotatable character, which is instantly thinking about character trees. Now, what's your thought on character trees?
Can you please describe to me character trees?
You have multiple characters that can be rotated in and out.
They are good when made into a character, maybe two. If you have like 5 rotatable characters, please don't do that because you're showing that you don't really have that much investment in any of them individually.
Okay.
Because there was one player I had about a year ago. They wanted to essentially, I was running one module that is escaping my mind right now, but basically they were playing a character they were really enjoying, but then they mentioned because they couldn't do a certain thing that maybe they want to change. I said okay. They were getting it ready and then went, oh, well, I don't know if I want to change now. I'm really enjoying this fighter rogue I have. and so they wanted to create like an NPC caravan of like some merchants.
Oh God!
And so that's like his excuse to rotate those characters. And I was like, no, because in reality, you're just like, I want to try out my cleric build. I want to try out my warlock build. And this is not that game. And there's many games that would not enjoy that concept. Like, imagine you're trying to role play with one of your friends. You've been playing the same character for 3 or 4 months. It's not that they die. It's they literally just change characters. It's jarring because as a human being, you don't randomly just change friends on a daily basis.
Right. So, in character trees, I like to say, I'll open it up to the entire table. Like, hey, I want to introduce the concept of character trees. I'll say everybody gets like 3 characters. You can rotate them out in logical places.
Yep.
You know, if you're resting at a settlement, at a city, regardless of how big, hey, just lo and behold, they happen to be there at the same time. And if you don't rotate them out every time, that's fine. You don't have to, but it's an opportunity to rotate them out. You can all rotate them out. You can have different parties, different party makeup. But I do have caveats. You cannot just hand equipment off to them.
Good.
You can't even say, I give it to that person to give to that person.
No.
Like, nope, your equipment is your equipment. And I do that so you do not just farm for loot.
Yes.
And I like the character tree concept as long as it's contained in those rules, because it allows people to have different character concept and ideas that they like. And then you may not have a character that's perfectly suited for specific style of mission or other character arcs. So if you have a friend at the table who's like, hey, my character arc is going to be this, we talked to the DM about it, like, you know what, this character's not quite suited for that, but I have a character concept that I'm able to roll that's going to help out better. Let's switch them out, that's fine. I don't mind. I like the idea. I also give characters 3 sessions to make changes before they're locked in.
That's really good. Rob, that's a fantastic piece of advice. Please, when you have a new group or you're starting a new campaign, allow players the time to change. I'm sorry, but I know it can be a little weird. I know it can be a little frustrating or strange, but allow players to change out characters, because they'll know pretty fast if they don't like playing something.
Yeah.
Allow them to change, because it doesn't actually hurt anything early on. Your campaign's just starting. You haven't written it all out yet. Give them that chance.
Absolutely.
I actually do something somewhat similar to what you do. I don't let them change out every city. What I do for my campaign, or my main campaign, we do a narrative kind of arc. So I sit down with the players at the end of an arc, and I go, okay, are we playing linear narrative where it's more railroady? Are we doing one character backstory? Are we doing like right now, players are on a hunt for a legendary item. Once they get it, the arc is done. I'll sit down with them all and I go, arc's done. Do any of you want to change characters? You may do that now, because once we enter another arc, they are basically locked in for that arc.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And that leads me to an idea that I'm going to try to remember to talk about next episode, because I want you to take some time to kind of think about it. Man, it's ruining the surprise if I mention it now, though, isn't it? Because people are going to expect it. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave it on a cliffhanger for the end of this episode.
You're an animal, Rob.
You know, I'll tell you after we hit the stop button, but the audience will have to remember to tune in next week.
Good.
So, all right, guys, thanks for checking us out. Remember, this is really our third and last real big introduction with Josh. I know that he definitely wants to stick with us for a while. You're excited to do so.
Yeah.
I like the energy.
Yeah, no, I love doing this.
Good. So we're going to really start breaking into some of our more developed topics that we wanted to talk about.
Absolutely.
From here on out, we'll probably try to cover one big topic and a few smaller topics. Josh and I's conversation is supernatural, so we don't mean to be lengthy, but it's super informational. And one thing I really appreciate, Josh, I'm going to let the audience know too, is that you inject so much advice into the conversation on how we're talking. You know, we both have experienced things to do and not to do, and you really point out, hey, don't do this because it's not the best format, or it's not the best way to come across. It doesn't come across great.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't want to gatekeep DMing, but for consistency's sake, for those of you who are inexperienced or on the lower end of your experience, or maybe are just maybe not as empathetic or not as sympathetic, just be open to the advice. I say definitely not because I mean it's ended badly consistently in my experience.
Right, and while everybody might have some other form of experience, that's fine. Play the game that makes you happy. And with that, check us out on Facebook at Epic Table Games or online at epictablegames.com.
Epic Table Games. Make way for the paladins. Make way for the paladins. Epic Table Games. Thank you for listening to the Epic Table Games audio show with the Paladins of Podcasts, Rob and Josh. Until next time, stay in touch on Facebook at Epic Table Games and online at epictablegames.com. Epic Table Games.